Greetings, fellow visitors. This is Upgrade Terminal, a Star of Providence fancast. I'm Malachi.
And I'm Nick. Welcome back to the facility.
Good evening, Nick.
Hello.
Spooky season is upon us.
So it would seem.
We normally ask each other about something nice that happened to us this week.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to change it up. I want to ask you, not if anything spooky happened to you this week, but do you like spooky stories in general?
Not particularly, no. It is not the kind of story that I look for.
Did you ever read Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark as a kid?
Is that a specific book?
Yes. It's a specific book series. Oh, man.
I have not.
Oh, you'll have to look that up at some point because it's got some of the creepiest art I've ever seen. Those images are like burned into my mind. Lots of good stories too. But do you have any spooky stories of your own?
Well, I've never had much in the way of spooky experiences, certainly, but I've certainly had spooky dreams or nightmares. The ones that I remember the most vividly are nightmares in which I am aware that it is a nightmare, so it's kind of a lucid dream,
Okay.
and I am trying to wake up from the nightmare. I'm trying to sort of, get myself out of it,
Mhm.
like, you pinch yourself or you do all these sorts of actions that would sort of snap you out of it.
Mhm.
But within the dream itself, the dream prevents me from doing that. I've had dreams where I'm trying to throw myself at something, and then I think this mysterious lady just makes all my muscles tense and freeze and I can't move, and it's like, no, you have to stay here in this nightmare for a little longer.
Maybe she's like, if you leave, I die. The nightmare ends.
That's an existential dread, and thankfully this one didn't have that. It was just a sense of, I am in a nightmare and I want to wake up, and it will not allow me.
Wow. Yeah, that's the worst kind of lucid dream.
Yeah, and some, of course, the question is, well, if you realize it's a nightmare, why don't you just make it better? It's a nightmare. I'm scared. I'm terrified. I'm not thinking straight. I just want out.
Yeah. You want to escape.
What about you? Do you have spooky stories?
I have several stories, several experiences in my life that I would classify as a little bit spooky. But I'm not going to share them all. I'm only going to share one because, you know, we the point of this podcast isn't for me to tell spooky stories. But the first thing I'll say is I didn't experience sleep paralysis in my life until, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago.
Relatively recent then.
Yeah, it was in the both instances happened in the last 7 years. I've heard that you are more likely to experience sleep paralysis when you're extremely tired. And so I experienced my job is really busy in the summer, and that is when I experienced sleep paralysis. Very scary experience, just sleep paralysis. You wake up, your your body secretes something that keeps you from moving and acting out your dreams when you sleep. And so sleep paralysis is when you wake up and that has yet to dissipate within your body, so you can't move and you panic and you hear and see very scary things. So the times that has happened to me, it's been absolutely terrifying. I thought that there was some sort of person in my house standing right over my bed looking down at me. It was terrifying. I was home alone at the time too, and I called someone close to me and when I could finally move, I called them and was talking to them. And after talking to them for about 20 seconds, I realized, oh my gosh, there isn't someone in my house. And that was sleep paralysis.
The second layer of the horror is like, I was talking to somebody, but there's nobody here.
Yes, it was very scary. In the last few years, one of the scariest things that happened to me is I was hiking up alone in the woods, and I was on an 8-mile hike. So it was 4 miles in, 4 miles out. And I went in all the way to the lake, and there were some people camping at the lake, just two guys up there fishing. And
Mm-hmm.
as I was walking back out, there was a portion of the trail that had experienced a wildfire a few years before. So all the trees were burnt out, and I could see really far in every direction.
Mm-hmm.
And all the trees that were left standing didn't have a lot of branches. They were just like these tall, black, burnout husks, right?
Mm.
So I picked up a stick, and as I was walking, I was kind of humming to myself, and I started bouncing the stick off the tree trunks as I passed them. And
Mm-hmm.
because of the nature of that clearing, it would kind of echo.
Mm-hmm.
And as I got halfway through, I smacked a tree, and then over behind me, I heard a I heard another smack, another
Mm-hmm.
stick smack onto a tree. I was like, huh, that was a really loud echo. And so I kept
Mm-hmm.
walking. I hit another tree, and then I heard that again, and I was like, that is not an echo. So, being very curious, I hit the stick on the tree in a rhythm. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
cock, cock, cock. And then there was a pause. So, it wasn't an echo. And I heard it again, the same cock, cock, cock. Nick, I dropped my stick and I ran. I was terrified. And it wasn't kind of like a supernatural fear. I mean, it could have just been a person, but I didn't
Yeah.
care. That was extremely terrifying to me. I was like, I'm getting out of here. And yeah, I got to my car as the sun was setting. I jumped in, locked the doors, and drove the 7 miles back to the main road. But yeah, I think that's probably one of the scariest things that's happened to me recently.
I'm trying to picture the scene, like the environment
Mm-hmm.
of all the burnt out trees and like being able to see for quite a long distance. That's a very vivid environment and perfect for feelings of unease.
Yeah. And, I looked around and I was like, man, if someone was out here, I should be able to see them unless they're like hiding behind a tree, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the other thing I mean, there weren't a lot of cars at the trailhead, and there were only two guys
Mm-hmm.
camping up there, you know? So, but anyway, it's pretty easy to psych yourself out in the middle of the woods.
Definitely.
Well, with spooky season comes a pretty significant change within Star of Providence. It's candy day, candy time.
Well, it's more like a candy week, really.
Yeah, fair.
For a week, which ends in Halloween, HP items, most of them, are replaced by candy versions, which is a lovely treat.
Yes, and I think candy corn is one of them, right?
Yeah, the 1 HP turns into candy corn, 2 HP becomes a candy bar, a full +1 max HP becomes a sundae, and the flan is still just a flan. It's still a flan.
Hmm. Isn't there one that's like a wrapped piece of candy?
I think that might be a 1 HP part, maybe?
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Candy corn. What do you think? You like candy corn or no?
I have never eaten candy corn in my life.
Well, consider yourself lucky. That stuff's nasty. It's literally wax. So I don't mind picking it up in Star of Providence, but I do mind picking it up in real life. Unless it's to throw it in a garbage can, then I don't mind picking it up.
I'm a bit confused as to why this candy is like a staple of the season, and yet it's so bad. It's just awful.
For as many people like me that hate it, there are just as
Mm-hmm.
many people that like it. But I'm convinced this is a candy corn tangent we're on here, but I'm convinced that candy corn continues to exist simply because it existed when people were young and they have a nostalgia for it. Not for the candy itself, but for like eating it as a kid. I'll never be able to prove this theory, but I feel like that company stays in business because people buy it simply for the nostalgia.
I suppose I'll have to take your word for it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But anyway, this is a seasonal change, the only seasonal change in Star of Providence. How do you normally Do you normally enjoy seasonal changes in games, Nick?
Not typically, no,
Hmm.
not really. I'm not much of a seasonal person in that regard.
I will say I don't really usually like them either. Um, in fact, I just saw today like a PUBG advertisement, Player Unknown's
Hmm.
Battlegrounds, and it was like
Yeah, yeah,
Halloween
yeah.
Zone, and there's like jack o' lanterns, and I'm like, no, it doesn't make any sense. It rips me out of the world of the game.
It just seems silly to you.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, usually when I play a video game, and we've talked a little bit about this, but I really like to get into the world, right? I step into a video game and I'm hoping to step into another world. If stuff from my world, my boring ass world, appears in that game, uh, I'm not always super happy about that. It just doesn't gel. And Star of Providence is actually an exception, even though I don't like candy corn, because it's not explicitly Halloween. So there's no jack o' lanterns.
Mhm.
There are ghosts, but
It
they were there
it's not
before.
it's not filled with stereotypical Halloween imagery.
Yeah, and it's not obnoxious, right?
Mhm.
Like an obnoxious seasonal change would be you come into the hub and Klein's has a mask on and there's jack o' lanterns and I I just I would not like that.
You you like that it doesn't make a big deal out of it. It's just a subtle thing, and it doesn't try to draw attention to it.
Yeah, no one's commenting on it. NPCs aren't saying Happy Halloween. It's just a nice little subtle nod. And I don't know who on the dev team loves Halloween, but I need to ask them about that because somebody obviously loves the season enough to put in a special seasonal change.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess we should look into that.
In the past, you and I have talked about scenes in the game Star of Providence and how it has a cutesy exterior, but really the story that the game is telling is a very emotional one. And I think that there are some pretty horrifying things that happen in the game and things that
Hmm.
have happened in the lore. So I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, what do you think is the scariest thing in Star of Providence?
That's a good question. What is the scariest thing? I mean, to some extent, that kind of depends on what scares you,
Hmm.
right? Like fear and horror are still very subjective things. So I can tell you what I find the scariest thing in the game, or like certainly something that's up there.
Hmm.
And if I had to summarize it in a word, it would be a creeping sense of dread about this whole thing,
Hmm.
right? Because as you start the game, you're in floor one. It's cheerful music. The you're having a good time. Enemies are kind of cutesy and like, oh, they're just like little ghosties and little crawlers and sentinels and all that stuff. It's very, you know, very cheerful in a sense. But as you start to go down the floors, the music gets more serious. The enemies start tipping you off that there's something going on here, and I feel this really gets amplified when you reach the sanctum, floor 5,
Hmm.
when you start seeing the backgrounds of like the cultists and sort of the murals about Monolith, and you get this sense of like something happened here.
Yeah.
You're not exactly sure what it is, but this facility is ground zero for something very important that happened here.
Hmm.
And then when you get into floor 6, the forbidden floor, as it were, that's when you realize that this place has been irrevocably scarred by something.
Hmm.
The architecture itself is hostile. Like the walls come alive to destroy you.
Hmm.
And whereas before you could sort of identify what was surrounding you, like you had, it's It's an excavation, it's archives, it's a maintenance system. Down here, you lose all sense of that. It is just a place that has been transformed by the power eternal.
Mm-hmm.
So you get the sense that the deeper you go, you are approaching something that is slowly corrupting everything around it. It is a kind of like this malicious force that is seeping and creeping into every part of the floors,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just sort of coming closer and closer to the source of it.
You know, the seals, the fact that you have to get the seals to unlock floor 6, I think they add to what you're saying because, if there are 4 locks on a door and
Mm-hmm.
people are trying to kill you to stop you from getting the keys to that door, it really builds up that dread of like, what is down there? Why was it sealed away?
Yeah, and sealed away so thoroughly that you have to fight this overlord, this very tough boss, and then two of the council members themselves try and stop you.
Mm-hmm.
Like this idea, like you can, like it is trying so hard to keep you from going down there, and you are still trying to break through.
Mm-hmm.
And related to that, you also have Temple. Like you have the warden who has sealed and imprisoned Chaos God,
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to just sort of defeat Warden, and it says when you defeat him at full power, he says, "Don't let it escape."
Yeah.
As you're about to face one of the most powerful and terrifying things in the game, in a sense.
Yes. Yeah. The only question you ask after hearing that is, don't let what escape?
And very quickly, you find out exactly what it is, and it is definitely something worth sealing.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, this whole journey of like the deeper you go, the more you see this place that has been warped around it. It gives you this feeling of like you're slowly, this slow dawning realization.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you it's a subtle thing. Little by little, you hear things about the council, the machine, the ritual that they attempted. You kind of start putting. You have all these pieces that you can't quite connect them directly, but they all sort of point you at something horrible happened here. A million souls have lost their home, and now there is just this that remains. And it is a subtle, slow thing,
Mm-hmm.
but it is very powerful. And you eventually come to learn the council tried to tap into a power to grant them everlasting life, but
As one
they
does.
either didn't. Yeah, as one does. They tried to tap into it, but they either didn't understand it or couldn't control it,
Mm-hmm.
and the end result has been a calamity. Even the power eternal itself, it is the term I would use is something like cosmic horror. This feeling like there is some very powerful and unknowable force or being
Mm-hmm.
out there that is capable of so much destruction, and to it you are utterly insignificant.
Mm-hmm.
You are surrounded by this again, this force, this being from another dimension, from the eternal domain perhaps, and it dwarfs you, and it has so much power, and in the end it seems like it ends up utterly consuming Null.
Mm-hmm.
Null tries to tap into it, and it takes over them. And that's sort of like, well, we return to the climax that we talk about so many times, but like that is the conclusion. Like the power tunnel corrupts you or the player character directly. And so this is kind of the thing, this creeping dread and the slow realization of all this that I find gives it this wonderful sense of dread that accumulates over time, and I have a lot of respect for it.
Yeah, well said. that is, for me, one of the most effective types of horror. The thing that I
Mm-hmm.
think is scary as well is also a kind of dread, but it's kind of the dread of a fate that you can't escape. Specifically, Noel and the player. You feel like you're making choices as you progress through the facility. But we talked about this once before, Nick, and you pointed something out to me that I hadn't realized. But when you enter an upgrade terminal, you can't
Mm-hmm.
choose to exit.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, obviously it's a game, but within the narrative of the game, that's kind of a creepy thing, because it's like, okay, Null is being led along by the power eternal deeper and deeper into the facility, being promised power beyond their wildest imagination. Now, obviously some of this is
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of headcanon of mine, but
Conjecture.
yeah, conjecture. But I think it's really kind of terrifying to think about a fate that you can't really control, and the illusion of free will. Why do I find this terrifying? I think it's like a thought that robs life of meaning, because if I
Hmm.
think about me, I'm kind of the sum of all my decisions, right? What I choose to wear, what I choose to play, the company I keep, all of these things. If all of these decisions are actually out of my control, and there is no such thing as free will, I don't really know who I am or what I am. And if I can't change my fate, or I can't impact the people around me, which is something I also think is very valuable in life, like, what's the point of anything?
I mean, it seems to me like to you it is terrifying because it makes you feel, in a sense, powerless.
Exactly. And the interesting thing about that is, like, it's the exact inverse of power eternal, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if I'm chasing this thing, Nola's chasing this power eternal, but if they're being led there, then yes, they are powerless. They're powerless to stop what's coming. They're powerless to acquire power. It's a zero sum game. They had lost from the start.
I mean, it's kind of irony in the sense that the promise of power leads you to something that will not give you any power at all. It has, in a sense, you've already been doomed right from the
Yeah,
start.
yeah,
You are fated to succumb, and you have no way of changing that.
yeah. And I think in day to day life, I mean, this is a thought that I gives me dread and is a little terrifying. But I mean, human beings are really, really good at not thinking about death and existential questions. So in my day to day life, it's not something that I dwell on. But if when I sit down and I think about it, it would be pretty disturbing if free will did not exist. I think there's actually a character in the game that expresses this pretty well. If you get, I
Hmm.
think you have to have the sunglasses cartridge, so you can
Hmm.
get the shop on floor 6, but you can run into the ascended one.
That would be the challenger of floor 6, so it would also have to spawn randomly, but it does happen.
Yeah, the ascended one is a creepy looking fella in a cloak. If you talk to him in the shop, he says your quest is futile. Power eternal exists outside of time. All of us have already perished. And the
Hmm.
first time I read that, I was like, damn. Because I think it kind of speaks to, like, he's just like, why are you even doing any of this? You know?
Because because fate says so.
Yeah. What's funny, because then you could ask Ascended One, like, well, why are you fighting back then, bro? Just,
Because fate says so.
yeah, just die and give me my unique weapon.
It's this kind of there's a word for I'm looking for, but this it is that sense of futility that no matter what you do, it is written.
Hmm.
So you don't have it. You have no control and no impact.
Hmm.
And
Like determinism.
yeah, determinism.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's like events are completely determined by previously existing causes.
Yeah, like the future is a completely inevitable result of the past.
Yeah. It's a bleak thought.
But it kind of suits the game where In a sense, the ending of the game is already written. Null will take the power eternal and will be destroyed by D13.
Yes. And, to be clear, I love this aspect of the game. I love this dread that
Mhm,
it brings because I really respect the narrative as well. And I think that people might not give it enough credit on first glance because of the exterior, the coding, the the
mhm,
the cute pixel coding on this game, but it has a really, really well thought out narrative.
mhm. I mean, this is the result of like years of development and apparent, and we all know like there's still more to come eventually in the future.
Oh yeah.
So it's we know that there's a lot that the devs want to say. It's just that it's probably going to be either cryptic or a matter of slowly uncovering piece by piece to get a sense of what the full picture even is.
I'm pretty confident that this kind of horror that we're talking about will persist in the game's narrative. And in fact,
I hope
in
so.
and in fact, maybe it will only become more horrifying when we realize what exactly is happening or what exactly happened. So we have that to look forward to.
Oh, absolutely. Like, to be clear, that's why I called it wonderful sense of dread. Like, it is horrifying as like a something from the character's point of view, but as someone who is experiencing it, it is. I admire the work that went into it to make it so well done.
Thanks so much for listening to our Star of Providence fancast. Big thanks to Garowslaw for allowing us to use his music and sound effects.
Be sure to check out all of the Star of Providence soundtracks on his Bandcamp page, including the base game soundtrack, the Relics of the Past DLC soundtrack, and the 5th Anniversary Edition soundtrack.
If you have any comments or suggestions for the show, or spooky stories of your own, you can reach out to us on our Discord server. We will post the server link in the show description.
And there you will find fellow pilots to talk with and discuss the show. Thanks for listening. We'll hope you join us next time.
This is what you came for, isn't it?
So be it.